Brazil hosted the 26th meeting of the Sao Paulo Forum after 4 years without an event due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Also in France, thousands of people took to the streets of a Paris suburb in remembrance of a French teen killed by police during a traffic stop, with outraged protesters led by his mother. And the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan denounced Sweden for allowing a protest with anti-Islam undertones, further clouding the Nordic nation's chances of quickly joining NATO. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Wednesday, the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, signed the Pact for a Fair Energy Transition with the local indigenous communities in the department of La Guajira. The Petro administration has proposed to the energy sector companies a new model of permanent partnership in which the YU communities will be allies. Signed by 140 indigenous authorities in the area of influence of the projects, 12 development companies, a trade union, and representatives of the national and local government and international cooperation, the effort is aimed at consolidating the clean energy projects that are already underway in the department of La Guajira, located in the northeast of the country.
If the projects are to be sustainable in time and last for decades, there must be a permanent pact with the YU communities, not a sporadic one, a permanent YU pact that there is called an energy pact in price and associativity, that is to say the YU community, the YU association, etc., must be partners of the projects. When being a partner of the projects, part of the utility goes to the communities.
At the same event, Orangel Guayauri, the leader of the Tancamana community, insisted on the need to inform and educate the communities, while recognizing the significance of the pact.
Today we can say we are generators or developers of wind farms, but many communities don't really understand the meaning of energy transition because today the YU community is precisely the great savior community of the world because it will make its contribution in mitigating impacts of climate change phenomenon. So we believe that on behalf of the YU community it will be praised because for a long time it has been a community in a state of desolation and precisely in a state of misery.
The Vice President of Colombia, Francia Márquez, in her speech stressed the need for establishing rules to preserve the protection of the territories.
We have a negative experience. I have to say it here, coming from a territory that was thought in terms of development, but not in terms of development with its people. And so this cannot happen to us now. It cannot happen to us that in times of the planet destruction, if the energy matrix laid its foundations and its rules on spoliation, on the environmental impact, on social impacts, and on cultural and spiritual impacts, this cannot happen to us now. Therefore, I believe that this pact has to establish rules on how to bet on energy transition and what the preservation of those territories means.
In Colombia, the Vice President, Francia Márquez, will officially take office as Minister of Equality. Francia Márquez's new portfolio will be in charge of the rights of women in all their diversities, but also on the diversities of the LGBTQI+ population and the people with disabilities, Afro-descendant, Raizal, Palanquero, indigenous, and peasant peoples. In addition, her functions include the needs of other people such as excluded populations like those in street situations, the migrant population, people living in poverty, and those living in marginalized territories where the state does not usually stay, specify the sources of the vice presidency. Because of organizational problems, the central act will be held on Thursday. However, the official act of possession will be on Friday. On Wednesday, hundreds of citizens took the streets of San Juan, the capital of Puerto Rico, in rejection of a proposal to increase electricity rates. Demonstrators arrived at the fortress, the island's seat of government, carrying flags and banners and exhibiting their already hard-to-pay electricity bills. Protesters claim that the price rise will further increase the cost of life of the island. Currently, electricity prices in households are twice what they are in the United States, while commercial and industrial rates are even much more than twice as higher. The proposed increase is part of a restructuring plan that will bring Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority out of bankruptcy. Also on Thursday, Brazil hosted the 26th meeting of the Sao Paulo Forum after 4 years without an event due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In Brasilia, workshops of the seminar Latin American and Caribbean integration and the challenges of leftist and progressive governments began as part of the program of the 26th Sao Paulo Forum. At least 700 people will participate in the forum, among them nearly 150 leaders of political organizations and social movements who will discuss regional integration among the countries of the continent. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is expected to attend the official inauguration of the forum at the 7 p.m. local time. And the judges continue delivering verdicts on Thursday on charges that the former president Jair Bolsonaro broke the law with his unproven allegations against Brazil's election system. The Superior Electoral Tribunal is trying the former president on charges he abused his office and misused the state media when he made undocumented allegations of security flaws in the electronic voting system. The lead judge on the case, Benedito Gonçalves, ruled on Tuesday to convict Bolsonaro, saying he had used violent speech and lies that endangered the credibility of the electoral system. Meanwhile, Superior Electoral Court Minister Floriano de Acevedo Marques also casted a guilty vote against Bolsonaro on Thursday for election fraud. The voting is now 3-1, with 3 more ministers expected to vote. If Bolsonaro gets 4 guilty votes, it means he will be barred from running for office for 8 years. In Argentina, different sectors mobilized to reject trans femicides in commemoration of the Stonewall riot in New York City, when in response to police repression, the LGBTQI+ community marched through the streets for the first time. Our correspondent Carolina Silvestre from Buenos Aires has the details.
The LGBTIQ+ community marched for the 8th consecutive year in rejection of transvesticides, transfemicides, and transhomicides.
Being a leading country in human rights, but to keep marching so trans people are not killed, so trans people don't disappear, is a bit painful. Yet, understanding that in the region only 8 countries have a gender identity law, it is important that we remain at the forefront of human rights and that we continue for those who cannot raise their voice, for those who cannot make themselves visible, that we continue to occupy the streets and that at some points this will be a celebration.
During the demonstration, activists demanded historical compensation for social and economic exclusion.
It is related to cultural transformation or cultural progress, which often falls behind the laws, especially in Argentina. In other countries, there was a cultural change first and then the laws. I believe that in our country it was not that way. The cultural change came after these progressive laws. It is essential so people can understand. Isn't it? To understand and try to abandon a little bit all that paranoid response in relation to LGBTIQ minorities.
They also demanded an end to institutional violence and the justification of torture based on the identities of transvestite trans people.
We still see the discrimination against our community. There is violence, there are also deaths, and it is important that the change be truly social, because not only a law is enough, but it has to be a collective change.
We know there is still a long way to go, but we in Argentina are a country of privileges. There are still 70 countries in the world that criminalizes for being LGBT people. Here we can get married, we have same-sex marriage, we can create and raise our families. We also have transgender labor quota. We have non-binary identities, and today we can be here in the square in the Congress of the Nation making this great celebration.
The lack of access to full enjoyment of political rights and the mistreatment of children were among the demands made by the demonstrators.
Carolina Silvestre, TeleSUR, Buenos Aires.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. On Thursday in France, thousands of people took to the streets of a Paris suburb in remembrance of a French teen killed by police during a traffic stop, with outraged protesters led by his mother. Nahel M., 17 years old, was shot in the chest at a point-blank range in the Paris suburb of Nanterre on Tuesday in an incident captured on video that has reignited debate in France about the police tactics. A march in Nahel's memory was led by his mother, Mouna, who waved at the crowds from an open-top truck, wearing a white T-shirt with the slogan "Justice for Nahel." Anger does not seem to abate, with protesters chanting "No justice, no peace," and "Everyone hates the police." Nahel M's death has sparked violent unrest around France, with rioters on Wednesday setting public buildings ablaze, torching cars and clashing with police in the cities from Lille to Toulouse, and 150 people were arrested. Nahel was an only child raised by a single mother who had been studying for an electrician's certificate, according to the French media. He had no criminal record. In this context, Emmanuel Macron, President of France, called for an urgent crisis cabinet meeting in the face of the strong protests taking place in several cities across the country. The demonstrations that began in Nanterre, an exclusive district in West Paris, after a policeman killed a 17-year-old Maghrebi young man with a gunshot, have prompted widespread criticism against the president and his interior minister, Gérald Darmanin, who this morning again defended police officers. The head of state affirmed that in the coming hours there must be a recollection, referring to the white march summoned by the victims' relatives. Macron also said that they are preparing for the coming days. France's Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin announced on Thursday that around 40,000 police will be deployed across the country to deal with the protesters.
Tonight, there will be many more police and gendarmes present, as was decided at the meeting you saw this morning. Since yesterday, there were 9,000 police and gendarmes mobilized, including 2,000 in the Paris area. I have decided to mobilize 40,000 police officers and gendarmes this evening and overnight, including 5,000 in the Paris area, as well as significant technical and technological resources to fight these riots, to make arrests, and above all to reestablish the republican order that the French people expect.
In the meantime, Nanterre residents react to tensions after the shooting and denounce aggressive police behavior.
Members of the police are behaving in an unbelievable, shameless way. In other words, they are a disgrace to the police. They are a disgrace to France, these people. I'm not saying all the police, but I'm saying that some members of the police behave in an incredible way. And why is that? Because they are omnipotent, because they feel that, as in 1980s, they can kill a young person from a working-class neighborhood without being bothered.
In the United Kingdom, a court of appeals has declared the government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda as unlawful. In a judgment delivered in London, the Court of Appeals said that Rwanda was not a safe country for asylum seekers. In doing so, the judges reversed a ruling in December by the High Court, which dismissed most legal challenges to the plan. The decision is unlikely to be the final final word in what has already been a prolonged legal battle over the government's offshoring plans, which have been fiercely criticized by activists and human rights groups.
The system in Rwanda are such that there are substantial grounds for believing that there is a real risk that persons sent to Rwanda will be returned to their home countries where they faced persecution or other inhumane treatment when in fact they have a good claim for asylum. In that sense, Rwanda is not a safe third country. The court is unanimous in accepting that the assurances given by the Rwandan government were made in good faith and were intended to address any defects in the asylum process. However, the majority believes that the evidence does not establish that the necessary changes had by then been reliably effected, or would have been at the time of the proposed removals. In consequence, sending anyone to Rwanda would constitute a breach of Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which Parliament has required the government to comply with.
And the UK government remains fully committed to its plan to send migrants to Rwanda, despite being ruled illegal on Thursday by the British judiciary, Home Secretary Suella Braverman said. In this way, Braverman stated that the policy of relocating asylum seekers to a safe third country for the processing of their claims is in line with the Refugee Convention, despite the court's ruling. The UK and Rwanda agreed in April 2022 on a 5-year plan for the transfer to Kigali of the majority of migrants arriving illegally on the British soil whose asylum claims would be processed there without the possibility of returning to the UK. On Thursday, legal representatives and activists welcomed the Court of Appeal's ruling declaring the British government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda as illegal, as the African nation cannot be considered a safe third country.
So our clients were very scared of being sent to Rwanda, a country they know nothing about, most have never been to, some have never heard of. And they thought they'd reached protection and safety in the UK after a long and grueling journey. And so they were very scared. They'll be relieved that that's not going to happen, but also they've been through a lot of uncertainty over the last year, and that's just compounded the trauma that they've experienced.
Well, it's hugely important because this is a flagship policy that the court has ruled is unlawful, and I'm delighted for those individual asylum seekers who have won their case today. So there were a number of cases brought today, and we represent Asylum Seed, which is a charity that deals with individual asylum seekers. And our case was arguing that the procedure adopted by the Home Office by which to send individuals to Rwanda was unlawful because it was procedurally unfair. It was too short, it didn't allow enough time for individuals to make representations, and it didn't allow for access to justice.
And we have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at TeleSUR English, and there you will be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. We have a final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back. The former Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras resigned on Thursday as leader of the Syriza party. Tsipras' resignation came after his party won less than 18% of the vote in the parliamentary elections and just 48 hours of the 300 available seats in the country's parliament. On the other hand, the election gave Kyriakos Mitsotakis his second term as prime minister and his conservative New Democracy Party with a majority of 158 seats in parliament. The defeat in Sunday's elections left the Syriza party looking to regain momentum as a minority party in Greece. Tsipras, who had led the party since 2009, served as the country's first left-wing prime minister. On Thursday, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan denounced Sweden for allowing a protest during which a man burned pages from the Quran, further clouding the Nordic nations' chances of quickly joining NATO.
While attack in Sweden on our holy book, the Quran, on the first day of Eid is a provocation. Those who commit this crime, as well as those who allow it under the guise of freedom of opinion, and those who tolerate this despicable act, will not be able to achieve their ambitions.
The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres condemned the latest Israeli government approval for thousands of additional homes in West Bank settlements. In a statement, the Secretary-General condemned the advancement of plans for over 5,000 housing units in Israeli settlements in Area Z of the occupied West Bank, including the retroactive regularization under Israeli law of 3 settlement outposts adjacent to the settlement of Eli. Guterres further said Israel's persistent expansion of its settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, deepens humanitarian needs, significantly fuels violence, increases the risk of confrontation, further entrenches the occupation, and undermines the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. And Muslim pilgrims took part in the Stoning of the Devil in Mina as the biggest Hajj pilgrimage since the COVID-19 pandemic draws to a close in Saudi Arabia. From dawn in Mina, hundreds of thousands of Muslim pilgrims began pelting 3 concrete monoliths representing Satan under soaring temperatures before heading to Mecca for a final circling of the Kaaba, the giant black cube at the Grand Mosque. More than 18 million people participated in the first unrestricted Hajj since COVID-19 struck in 2020. In 2019, about 25 million, the most on record, joined the pilgrimage. The overwhelming majority of the 18 million pilgrims this year were foreigners coming from about 160 countries. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.